You know that feeling when you catch your own reflection where it shouldn't be? What if it wasn't a mirror? Tonight, you'll hear four allegedly true stories from people who saw their own double. Not a dream, not a trick, but moments that still haunt them today. Dim the lights, listen close, because sometimes the scariest person you can meet is yourself.
I never gave much thought to doppelgangers. It always sounded like internet nonsense stories for people who want to feel special, not something real. That changed for me the morning I saw myself waiting for the train in downtown Chicago. I'd worked a graveyard security shift, running on no sleep, barely enough energy to care about anything except getting home. The Green Line platform was nearly empty, just the usual shuffling bodies lost in their phones. That's when I saw him. A guy in a black hoodie, gray sneakers, hands in his pockets. He looked up, and for a split second, it felt like I was looking in a mirror. Same jawline, same tired eyes. It wasn't just a resemblance, it was me. He didn't seem shocked, just stared, cold and blank, like he was waiting for me to do something. The train roared in, headlights scattering across the gray. I blinked and he was gone, slipped into the crowd, vanished before I could react. I rode home, staring at my reflection in the dirty window, trying to convince myself I was hallucinating, but the feeling wouldn't let go. It followed me, even after I crawled into bed. At night, I'd jolt awake, convinced there was someone else in my apartment, watching from the shadows just out of sight. Most people talk about finding themselves. That morning, I literally saw myself, and nothing felt the same after. I started keeping notes, tracking every weird detail, desperate for proof I wasn't going insane. I thought that was the end. But a few days later, he showed up again, this time in broad daylight, and this time he smiled. For days, I tried to push the whole thing out of my mind, but weird little glitches started stacking up. One morning, my apartment keys turned up in my jacket instead of my backpack. My coffee mug, which I always left in the sink, showed up on my nightstand. I caught myself having conversations I swore already happened, like I was stuck in a loop, repeating scenes with minor changes. Then I saw him again. Afternoon clear as day at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my place. He sat by the window stirring his drink, phone in hand. Same hair, same cheap watch, same tired posture, but this time he saw me looking, and he smiled slow, like he knew I'd come looking for him. My stomach dropped. I froze, unable to move, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear. He got up, left his cup half full, and walked out without a word. I watched him blend into the crowd on the street, swallowed by the city. I rushed outside, but he was gone. That night I dreamed of train platforms, endless crowds, and a face staring back at me through glass. I woke up in a cold sweat, light still on, feeling watched. After that, I kept seeing glimpses across the street, reflected in windows, always one step ahead. I started to feel like my life was bleeding into someone else's, or theirs into mine. I wrote everything down, but none of it made sense. I was haunted by the feeling that the world had shifted sideways, and I was the only one who noticed. It all peaked one Friday after another long shift. I walked home through slush, exhausted, mind running on autopilot. I turned the corner near my building and froze. There he was, across the street, leaning against the same brick wall I passed every day. He didn't look away. He stepped off the curb, crossing straight toward me. For a second, nobody else existed, just the two of us in that cold, gray morning. He stopped an arm's length away. Up close, there was no doubt. His skin, the scar, the chipped front tooth. I could have been staring into a mirror. He looked at me like he'd been waiting all along. "Do you ever feel like you're in the wrong place?" he asked, voice low and flat. It sounded like mine but off, like an echo from another room. I couldn't answer. My chest tightened, every instinct telling me to run, but my feet were cemented to the sidewalk. He smiled again, smaller this time, and said, "You shouldn't be here." Then he brushed past me, disappearing into the morning traffic. I spun around, but he was gone. Back in my apartment, I sat in the dark, replaying it over and over. I tried calling friends, but I didn't know how to explain what just happened without sounding crazy. The city felt suddenly unfamiliar, like a place I'd only dreamed about. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound outside made me flinch. Every reflection in glass made me pause. I kept seeing his eyes and the way he said those words. "You shouldn't be here." After that day, everything shifted. I avoided the train, changed my routines, tried to erase patterns he could follow. Still, every shadow felt suspicious. Every passing glance in a window made my pulse spike. Sometimes I'd catch a flash of movement, a familiar shape vanishing around a corner, a reflection in a storefront glass that didn't match my own. The dreams got worse. I'd see him standing in my room, face hidden in shadow, whispering words I couldn't quite understand. I'd wake up convinced he'd been there, just out of reach. Friends noticed I was jumpy, distant. I lied, said I was stressed from work, but the truth was harder to say out loud. I wasn't sure I was alone in my own life anymore. 6 weeks after our last encounter, I moved. Different neighborhood, new job, tossed the hoodie and changed my phone number. I wanted to believe distance would make a difference, but late at night, when the city was quiet, I'd still feel that presence, like someone was tracing my steps, living the same life half a second behind. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe I hallucinated. Maybe stress scrambled my memory. But sometimes, I'll catch my reflection, and for a split second, it's not quite right. Like I'm the one out of place. People talk about seeing themselves as some metaphor for self-discovery, but when you actually meet your double, there's nothing enlightening about it. Just a sense that the world isn't as solid as you thought, and maybe you're not the only one walking around in your skin. I still wonder what he meant by, "You shouldn't be here." Some days, I wonder which one of us he was talking to. I don't tell this story to people I work with, not because I'm worried they won't believe me, but because I'm not sure I'd believe it myself if I heard it from someone else. It happened 2 years ago during the winter when I was picking up as much overtime as possible at the hospital. I'm an ER nurse, night shift. If you've ever worked nights, you know how the hours blend together. Everything gets weird. Hallways echo when they shouldn't. You start to question if you're awake or dreaming. It was a Tuesday in January, cold as hell outside, that kind of night where the windows sweat and the heating can't keep up. I'd just started my shift, 7 p.m., already dead tired. Coffee wasn't helping. The waiting room was quiet, fluorescent lights buzzing. Linoleum floor sticky, in that way you notice only at 3 in the morning. I remember that because I kept looking at the clock, annoyed at how slow the hands moved. Around 9:30, we got a call that a new patient was coming in. Young male brought in by police for confused behavior. Nothing new. We get a lot of drunks, lost college kids, the occasional junkie with wild stories about shadow people and time loops. Usually, I tune it out. But this guy, he looked exactly like me. And I don't mean sort of similar. I mean exactly. Same hair, same nose, same weird scar above the eyebrow I got from falling off my bike at 8. He even wore the same kind of old gray hoodie I had at home. The paramedics wheeled him in, and for a split second, I honestly thought someone was screwing with me. Some elaborate prank, or a sleep-deprived hallucination. I waited for everyone to laugh. No one did. He was groggy, mumbling. When I leaned over him to check his vitals, he blinked at me, eyes wide, scared, and said, "Oh God, not again." I didn't know what to say. I asked him for his name. He just stared, silent, then started to shiver. The police said they found him wandering in a parking lot, barefoot, repeating the same phrase. "This isn't right. I need to go home." I tried to play it cool. Took his pulse. Normal. Temperature. Slightly low. No wallet. No phone. Nothing. Just the clothes on his back. When I told the attending physician what happened, he looked at me like I'd left out a detail. "You okay?" he asked. I said yes, but I wasn't. I felt split. Like the world had hiccuped and suddenly 2 versions of me existed, just for a moment, in the same place. We kept him in a private room. The rest of my shift was a blur. I kept finding excuses to walk past his door. He just sat there, staring at the wall, sometimes at the mirror like he was waiting for something or someone to come back. That was the first night, and honestly, the least strange. The rest of the shift, I couldn't keep my mind straight. Every time I passed his room, he'd catch my eye through the glass. There was something about the way he looked at me, like he was checking a reflection that didn't add up. At first, I thought it was my imagination, that I was just tired and looking for patterns. But every time I glanced in, he'd already be watching, face pale, shoulders tensed, like he expected me to open the door and tell him some awful news. Around 2 a.m., I finally went in to check his vitals again. He sat up when he saw me, clutching the thin hospital blanket like it was an anchor. "You work here?" he asked, voice rough. I nodded. "Do you remember last time?" I told him I'd never seen him before. That was true, but it felt like a lie even as I said it. He shook his head, as if disappointed. Then he said, "You told me I was dead." The words dropped into the silence like a stone into a well-known splash, just a sinking cold that lingered. I wanted to ask what he meant, but my mouth was too dry. Instead, I checked his ID band. Blank, just John Doe, not even a fake name to work with. I asked him where he was from. He said, "Here, I think. I keep ending up here." The lights in the hallway flickered. Somewhere, a monitor beeped out of rhythm. My nerves felt frayed, jangling. I tried to act like nothing was wrong. I told him I'd get the doctor. He grabbed my wrist tight, desperate. "You have to remember, I keep seeing you. I always see you first." I got free and stepped out fast, heart banging in my chest. I'm not superstitious, but I've seen enough weird things in hospitals to know when something's off. That night, it felt like the universe had doubled back on itself and I was caught in the crosshairs. When my shift finally ended, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. I caught my own reflection in the window by the exit hair must, eyes ringed with dark circles, and for a split second I thought it was him looking out at me. The following day, I came in early for my next shift. Couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. The whole day felt stretched thin, like my brain was walking on glass. I asked at the desk if John Doe was still on the floor. The clerk gave me a weird look, said the psych team was evaluating him, but he hadn't spoken since morning. No visitors, no family, nothing. When I checked on him, he was sitting in the exact same spot, blanket draped over his knees. The lights in his room felt dimmer somehow, like the shadows were gathering around him. I knocked, stepped inside. He didn't look at me, just kept mumbling something under his breath. Too quiet to catch. I sat on the edge of the bed, not something we're supposed to do, but I couldn't help it. The room felt too small for both of us. I asked him if he remembered anything else. At first, nothing. Then, without turning his head, he said, "You need to wake up." I felt a chill slide down my back. I tried to brush it off, told myself he was just confused, maybe repeating something he'd heard before. But then he looked at me, really looked, like he was searching for something under my skin. "This isn't the first time," he said. "It's never the first time. You always leave, and I always stay." My hands started shaking. I asked him what he meant. He said, "It always ends here, in this room, with you and me." He started to cry, silent and shuddering, like he'd done it 100 times before. The psych consult finally showed up and I let them do their job. I stepped out, leaning against the cold wall, trying to steady my breath. Every noise from that room made my skin crawl. Later that night, I found his bed empty. No one saw him leave. Security checked the cameras, nothing. No footage of him walking out. No one matching his description on any of the floors. He was just gone. I spent the rest of the shift jumping at shadows, every face in the hallway, looking just a little too familiar. I drove home that morning with my nerves shot, head full of static. The city was waking up, streetlights flickering off as the sky went gray. I caught myself checking every mirror, rear view, side, even store windows, half expecting to see him staring back. For weeks after, I found myself pausing at odd moments. The staff break room, the ER lobby at night, the end of some too bright hallway, places where you catch your own reflection and have to blink twice just to be sure it's really you. I kept thinking about what he said. "You always leave, and I always stay." What does that mean? Which of us left? Which of us stayed? Nobody at work wanted to talk about it. Some of them pretended not to remember the whole thing. One nurse told me maybe he was just a runaway with a good memory for faces. Another joked that hospitals collect lost souls. Nobody had answers. His file stayed open for months. No name, no new info, just a quiet mystery gathering dust. Sometimes I still see him. Not in person, but in that split-second pause when I pass a dark window or glance across a crowded street. It's always just my own face, but it never feels right, like something is slightly out of sync, like I'm 1 second ahead or behind where I should be. I don't know what happened to him or who he was, if he was even real in the way most people are real, but every once in a while I think about that night, and a weird suspicion creeps in. Maybe I'm the one who got left behind, maybe somewhere out there. I'm the stranger on the other side of the glass looking for a way back in. Growing up in a small town, the idea of running into someone who looked exactly like me never crossed my mind. Everybody knew everybody. Faces didn't blur together. But my senior year of high school, things started happening that made me question whether I really knew myself at all. It began with whispers in the hallways. Friends would mention seeing me at places I hadn't been, outside the gas station late at night, riding my bike near the lake while I was home finishing homework. At first, I figured it was just a case of mistaken identity. Maybe someone new had moved to town and happened to share my style. Plain hoodies, beat-up sneakers, messy brown hair. But then things got weirder. Teachers would ask why I hadn't said hello when I passed them at the grocery store. My mom swore she saw me walking home from practice, even though I was in my room with the door shut. I started to feel paranoid, like there was a version of me floating around living a life parallel to mine, showing up just long enough to stir confusion. I laughed it off when friends joked about my twin, but every time I'd catch a glimpse of myself in a window, my heart would jump. One night in April, everything shifted. I was out late, biking home after a movie at a friend's house. The town was quiet, just the hum of streetlights and the crunch of gravel under my tires. I turned onto my street and saw a figure ahead. Same build, same hunched shoulders, moving with the exact same rhythm I did when I was tired. I slowed, heart pounding, every instinct telling me to look away. But as I drew closer, the figure stopped and glanced over its shoulder. My face stared back at me, blank and tired, like a reflection with no glass. I froze in the middle of the street, my bike wheels crunching to a halt. The figure watched me, unblinking, hands shoved deep in the same kind of jacket I was wearing. For a few seconds, it was like staring into a living photograph. Then, without a word, he turned and vanished between two houses, slipping into the dark like a ghost. I wanted to believe it was just bad lighting or a trick of my exhausted mind, but I knew what I saw. I went straight home, locked the door, and barely slept. The next day, things spiraled. My phone buzzed with messages, friends joking that I was quick on my feet or asking why I'd ignored them at the diner, even though I'd been home all night. My coach pulled me aside, annoyed that I'd skipped morning practice. He insisted he saw me jogging past the bleachers at sunrise. My stomach dropped. I'd slept through my alarm, missed practice entirely, but the details were too specific to be random. At home, I found things out of place. My backpack dumped on the porch, muddy shoes by the door that weren't mine. Even my little sister complained that I was being weird, saying I walked past her room twice without speaking. The more I tried to explain, the more nobody believed me. I caught myself watching my own movements, second-guessing every memory. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think I saw someone moving through the backyard, the shadow of a boy who looked just like me pausing at the fence before slipping into the trees. Paranoia set in. I started keeping my curtains closed, double-checking that the doors were locked. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling I was sharing my life with someone, or something, that had every right to it. By May, the whole thing was starting to unravel me. I barely recognized my own days. Every time I tried to pin down what was happening, new stories popped up. One night, my mom accused me of sneaking out because she saw someone in my jacket walking past her car around midnight. When I showed her I'd been asleep in bed, she looked at me like I was lying. My friends started to pull away, tired of my weird excuses and distracted energy. Even teachers seemed wary, as if they couldn't trust what they were seeing anymore. The worst was the night I heard footsteps outside my window. I looked through the blinds and saw him, my double, hunched over, rummaging through the garden shed. He moved with a weird, deliberate calm, like he belonged there. I watched, paralyzed, as he turned and met my gaze through the darkness. For a few terrifying seconds, we locked eyes. He smiled, just a little, and then turned, melting into the trees at the edge of our yard. After that, my world got smaller. I stopped going out unless I had to, started recording voice memos of where I was and what I was doing, trying to build some kind of alibi even for myself. But no matter what I did, the stories followed. My double was everywhere, popping up at the corner store, seen riding my old bike across town, even waving at neighbors who waved back. Everyone had a version of me in their head, but I didn't trust any of them. One night, I woke up to the sound of my own voice whispering from the hallway. My door was closed, but the voice was definitely mine. I lay frozen in bed, listening as it faded away, not sure if I'd ever truly be alone again. The summer after graduation, I decided I couldn't live like that anymore. I started applying for colleges as far from home as possible, desperate for a clean break, a place where my name and face didn't mean anything. The last straw came in July. I was in line at the grocery store when the cashier asked if I was back so soon. She swore I'd just come through an hour before, bought the same snacks, even wore the same shirt. When I said she must have been mistaken, her face went blank, like she didn't know what to believe. I walked home in a fog, unable to shake the feeling that the town itself had started to believe in my double more than it believed in me. My final week at home, I caught one last glimpse. I was out for a late walk, trying to clear my head when I saw him again. My double, standing beneath the old streetlight by the park. He looked tired, worn down, but he watched me with a steady, knowing gaze. I thought about calling out, demanding an answer, but something in me froze. He smiled, small and sad, and then he turned and disappeared into the dark. I stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of my own breathing, wondering which one of us was supposed to leave. When I finally moved away, things settled. The weird stories stopped, or maybe I just stopped hearing them. But sometimes, late at night in a new city, I'll catch my reflection in a window and hesitate. For a split second, it feels like I'm watching someone else walk by, a ghost trailing just out of reach. I still wonder if my double is out there, slipping into the gaps I left behind, living a life I could have had. Maybe he's happier, maybe he's just as lost. I don't think you ever really outrun yourself, not when you've seen the proof that you're not the only version that exists. Some nights I lie awake and wonder if we ever meet again. Would I recognize which one of us is real? I used to laugh when people brought up doppelgangers. It sounded like something out of a cheap thriller or a bored Reddit thread, not something anyone actually dealt with in real life. That changed one rainy night in Boston when I was 19. It was late October, windy, streets slick with rain, headlights smearing across wet pavement. I'd just finished a late shift at a pizza shop, tired and hungry, my backpack heavy on my shoulders. As usual, I walked the same route home, cutting through a maze of side streets to avoid the rowdy bars. Halfway home, I stopped at a crosswalk waiting for the light to change. That's when I noticed a guy standing on the opposite corner. He was built just like me, same height, same way he held his shoulders. He wore a navy jacket, gray beanie, and black jeans. Nothing unusual, except for the way he watched me. Not casual, not a passing glance, but laser focused, like he was trying to memorize my face. The light turned. I started across, but so did he, matching my pace step for step. For a split second, as we passed each other under the yellow glare of a street lamp, I saw his face, and my stomach twisted. It was mine, not just a look-alike. He had my eyes, my mouth, even the stupid scar on my chin from a skateboarding fall when I was 12. He didn't say a word. He just brushed past, shoulders almost touching. For a moment, I felt like I'd stepped out of my own body. By the time I looked back, he'd disappeared into the fog. I tried to shake it off, but that was the night I stopped laughing about doppelgangers. After that night, I tried to convince myself it was just a weird look-alike or a trick of the light. Boston's full of students. People blur together, but that feeling wouldn't let go. I found myself scanning every crowd, every bus window, half expecting to spot him again. I started to notice strange coincidences. Texts in my phone I didn't remember sending, my shoes lined up wrong by the door, a receipt for coffee from a place I never visited. 2 weeks later, it happened again. I was sitting in a campus cafe, working through an overdue assignment, when I caught sight of someone outside the window. Same jacket, same slouch, head bent as he scrolled through his phone. My skin prickled. He looked up, and I saw my own face staring right back at me. The same hesitant frown, the same nervous bite of the lower lip. For a second, it felt like looking into a future I hadn't lived yet. He lingered by the door but never came in. I sat frozen, breath shallow, heart pounding. When I finally worked up the nerve to go outside, he was gone, like he'd evaporated into the busy sidewalk. That night, I barely slept. My dreams were filled with footsteps following me, shadows slipping around corners, my own voice whispering things I couldn't remember by morning. It got so I couldn't walk anywhere without feeling watched. I even caught myself in the mirror one evening, staring too long, double-checking the curve of my jaw, the scar, wondering if I would know the difference if I really met myself again. By November, I was starting to come undone. It wasn't just the sightings or the sense of being watched. Things in my life started to shift in small, unsettling ways. I'd hear my name whispered when no one was there. Friends would mention seeing me in places I hadn't been, like the library late at night or walking along the river at dawn. One time, a classmate asked why I ignored her at the bookstore that afternoon. I hadn't set foot near that part of town in days. One evening, exhausted and wired, I ducked into a corner store for snacks. As I reached for a bottle of water, I caught my own reflection in the freezer glass, except it wasn't a reflection. My double stood on the other side, same clothes, same wild look in his eyes. He didn't move, just stared, unblinking, as if daring me to acknowledge him. I dropped everything and ran out into the street, lungs burning. Behind me, I heard the bell above the door jingle, and a pair of footsteps echoed mine for half a block. When I finally turned, nobody was there. The sidewalks were empty, the rain falling harder now, masking every sound. I went home shaking, double-checked every lock, pushed a chair under the handle just in case. That night, I dreamed I was outside my own apartment, watching myself sleep through the window. I woke up to find my phone on the floor, screen still lit up, a half-written text to a number I didn't recognize. It felt like the world had shifted sideways, like maybe there wasn't room for both of us anymore. After that night in the alley, I started avoiding my own reflection. Mirrors felt hostile, like they were waiting for me to slip up and let him step through. My routines became unpredictable on purpose. I'd take different routes home, eat at odd hours, turn my phone off just to feel like I was in control of my own life. But it didn't help. Sometimes I'd see him on the opposite side of the street, pausing just long enough for me to notice before vanishing into the crowd. Once, I got a text from an unknown number. "You're getting closer." No context, no reply. Just those words sitting on my screen like a dare. I started having trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see the same scene. The alley, the snow, his face so much like mine it made my stomach hurt. I'd jolt awake with the sense that he was somewhere nearby, living out a life parallel to mine, just half a beat ahead or behind. My friends drifted away, tired of my jumpiness and paranoia. I couldn't blame them. I barely recognized myself anymore. It all came to a head one foggy morning in December. I was heading to class when I saw him waiting at the same crosswalk where this all started. He looked older, more worn, but the way he watched me, steady, unblinking, froze me in place. For the first time, I felt sorry for him. Maybe he was just as lost as I was, trapped in a loop we didn't choose. The light changed. He stepped forward, but this time I didn't move. I just stood there, letting him pass. As he disappeared into the mist, it felt like something let go inside me. I still see him sometimes, always at a distance, always just out of reach. But now, I try not to look back. Sometimes I wonder which one of us is real, or if we're both just echoes. Either way, I keep moving forward, even when I'm not sure who's really walking in my shoes.